We just came out of a sermon series that was titled Discipled. And we got to look at a few weeks of what it looked like to actually really walk out this thing with Jesus and seeing how Jesus always extends an invitation and he always extends a call and he calls upon us to get us to come into a learning relationship with him. And after that, now I think that I personally believe that to know and to be known are two of our deepest needs coming out of that as relational beings, right? And in this fast-paced, disconnected digital world, I mean, it is so easy to just have all the followers, right? All the connections, all the friends. I mean, so many friends that you don't even know who they are. Right? You could have all the friends in the world that you could meet in public, walk right by them, but your friends on a digital platform, and you could have all the fans, all these people, and still feel completely alone. But did you know that we were created for more than just relational tension? We were actually created in the very image of the triune God, the one that made us for community. He didn't make us to be sitting in isolation and stuck to a device. He didn't make us to where, but he created us for community, for fellowship. He created us for that and for kingdom-centered relationships. You know, he created us so that we could have kingdom-centered relationships and relationships that honored God and took us to the next level, that took us to the next place. The people that we are constantly around shouldn't just be the ones that are sucking the life out of us so much that we're lethargic and we're starving and we're never getting anything poured back into us. He created us for kingdom-centered relationships and for community. And so starting today, I want to start a sermon series that we have titled Known. Known. It's real simple, right? But over the next few weeks, I want to look at some of the scriptures in Psalms. I want to look at some of the letters of Paul and Peter, and even some of the very words of Jesus himself, and look at what it really means to gain a deeper understanding and appreciation of God's intention and design for his creation. You and I, his creation. Each one of us. It's hard to fathom sometimes that God created every single one of us in his image, and he created us so much in his image that we have stapled all of these things to our own minds and to our own selves. But when God created you, when he sat down and he created every single one of us, he went to himself to draw upon himself. He went to the earth on every other thing that he created. But when God created man, it says that he went to himself. And then whenever he created you, he saw that it was good, and he took a break from creating anything else because you were created perfectly. You were created perfectly, so perfect that he's like, hey, you know what? I'm done. I don't even need to create anything else because, man, this is good. And he sat back and he kicked his feet up on the throne and he was like, man, look at what I just did. Look at what I just did. And as we begin our series today, I'm going to look into Psalms 139 and see what it says about the very first moments of human life and really look at it. But before I begin, I want to ask a few questions with this in mind. Right? And you can write them down. You can take a picture of them. But I want you to ponder on these, because when was the last time that you were called wonderful? Right? When was the last time that you were called wonderful? Right? Like we can quote the scriptures all we want, but do we really believe them? Do we really live them? Right? Do we really believe that we are what the Bible says that we are? Do we really believe what God says that we are, that God tells us that we are? When was the last time that you felt deeply personally known by another? Right? When was the last time that you really felt deeply personally loved and known by somebody else? When was the last time that you thought about what it means to actually be a saint? Right? Or a member of God's holy priesthood? Right? Like a friend and a family member of Jesus, literally. Like it says that you are co-heirs. That means that you have an inheritance of that family member. If you are a co-heir, you have an inheritance, and every single one of us are family members of that. And so here's a spoiler alert for you. Here's a spoiler alert, is that God has said all of these things about you, and he knows you more deeply than you have ever known yourself. He knows you deeper than you could ever think, or more thoroughly than anyone else in this world. He knows you more thoroughly than that, more thoroughly than the person that you thought that you knew. So therefore, his opinion of you it should be way more valued than an opinion of even your own self, or what he says about you actually holds more weight than what anybody else has ever said about you. And it comes down to identity. And I think personally, identity is probably one of the biggest hurdles in the body and in the world today. That's why so many advertisements are stapled to making somebody feel like they can be better, sexually stimulating in some capacity. But is what it does is it leaves every woman and man fighting for attention and feeling like they're not enough, because everything is telling you that you need this or you need that and you need more. And it's an identity issue. Listen, you will never, or you will only ever accomplish what you believe yourself to do. You will never accomplish more than what you believe yourself to believe. Because if you tell yourself that you're never going to be able to be more than what you are or what you have settled for, if you're never going to be able to do anything else than what you have said that yourself, well, I'll just never be able to accomplish this, or I'll never be able to do that, or I'm only this, or I'm only that, then you will actually keep yourself. It reminds me of this illustration of I think it's gnats. Right, and they've did an experiment where they put all these gnats in a jar, and they keep the lid on the jar, and then the gnats will try to jump out, but they will only be able to hit the lid. And then after so much time, they're going to remove the lid, and then what happens is the gnats will not jump out any further than what they have been trained to do. And I think that it's the same thing in a lot of our lives, right? As we have this idea that we can't get further than what we have allowed ourselves to believe, and we constantly hit this ceiling that we set to ourselves because we don't believe in ourselves anymore. And I think that we will never accomplish any more than what we believe to accomplish. And we bring ourselves to a point of self-defeat. And so I want to jump in Psalms 139 today. But before I do, I want to give just a little bit of backdrop, right? Because we got to know who's writing the story. And the story is coming in Psalms 139 from King David. And some of us might know a little bit about King David, but King David is one that is the story of David and Goliath. Maybe some of us has heard about David and Goliath and this giant that was defeated by David, or maybe some of us has heard about David and Bathsheba and the great fall that David had, and it was attributed that his sons were even cursed because some of this, and David and his mighty men, he had a strong army, and he defeated large battles, and he was known as the conquering king of Israel, right? But he was also just a simple shepherd boy. David was a simple shepherd boy, and was a man that, in fact, actually was on the backside of the mountain tending to his father's sheep. He was serving on the backside of a mountain of something that wasn't even his own, but he was about a 14 or 15-year-old boy, and he was serving his father's sheep. And when Samuel came to anoint him, he came down, and even his own blood father, the one that he was serving, discounted him, because when the prophet Samuel showed up, he said, hey, yeah, where's all the sons? And he said, here's all 7 of my sons. But the interesting thing is that he actually had 8 sons. He didn't have 7 sons. And his own father counted him out because he didn't think that he was the one that was going to be fit for the kingdom. And this is him, but he turned into a mighty man of God. And so he lived both a complicated life, right? One of failure, one of highs and lows, and one that has experienced mountaintop experiences, and then one that has also experienced complete utter failure and agonizing pain. And yet King David was known in the book of Samuel as one that followed after God's own heart. That he was a man after God's own heart. And so in Psalms 139, I want to start in verse 1. And it's an amazing look into David's intimate relationship with an understanding of who God is. And in Psalms 139, he says this. He says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me." He said, "You know me when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar, and you discern my going and my lying down. And you are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely." Now let that resonate on you. Before you said all that stuff you said before you got here, before you said all that stuff that you've been thinking in your head even since you've been here, the Lord knew it completely. He says, "You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me, and such knowledge is too wonderful for me." The knowledge that you have, the deep intricacies that you have searched into me, the deep things of who I am and what you say that I am, all of that stuff, when you know how I rise and how every move that I make, you know, and such knowledge is too wonderful for me, and it's too lofty for me to obtain. We're going to talk a little bit more about this first point next week, so I don't want to labor too long on it, but I want to stop for just a second and talk about what it means to be fully known. What it means to be fully known, because David was in a position right here in Psalms where he had walked through life. He had did a lot of stuff, and he stops and he parks here for a minute, and he says, he knows me when I sit down, and he knows me when I stand up, and he knows my thoughts, and he knows my words, and he knows where I'm heading, and he knows why I wanted to even get there. And what's interesting is if you didn't know any better, you would think I was describing a Class A stalker. Now, the interesting thing is some of you know what that's like. One, because you have been stalked by a Class A stalker. Two, is some of you have been a Class A stalker. Nonetheless, we have all participated in this party at some time or another, I'm sure. But the truth is, honestly, all jokes aside, is even David acknowledges just how difficult it is to understand the depth of God's comprehension. The depths of God and God's knowledge and understanding to him, he says, is things that are too wonderful for me to even understand. Things that are too lofty. Things that I can't even, and in Isaiah 55, he says this. In verse 8, he says, "My thoughts are nothing like your thoughts, says the Lord. My ways are far beyond anything you could even imagine." Basically, he's saying, hey, whatever you have thought about yourself, you can't even begin to think about what I think about you. You've been holding yourself down like the flea. You've been holding yourself down to a position to where you don't even think that you could do anything greater. And he goes on in verse 9 and he says, "For just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts." God has abilities so far outside of ours that we cannot even imagine what they are. We can't even begin to imagine the extent of what he actually feels for every single one of us. And I want you to imagine for a moment the smartest person that you know. In the first service, we had somebody reach over and touch their wife, and it's like, oh, God. But that was a moment for all the men to reach their wife and like bat the eyes, and you can expect a reward later. The husbands, okay, the husbands. But anyways, Honestly, think of the smartest person that you know, like somebody that you look up to, like whoever it may be. It could be a mentor, it could be a family member, right? It could be an advisor, it could be a trusted person that you allow to speak into you. But whoever it is, just think for a moment how you interact with them. Right, how you interact with them whenever they begin to speak something to you, right? Like me personally, I know my environment. Right, I'm always an observer of my environment. I know there's environments where I talk because I'm the influencer, and then I know there's environments where I shut up because I'm being influenced. And I need to shut up sometimes. I think that's a word for somebody. You need a spirit of shut up. Thus saith the Lord. You want get a spirit of shut up in your life and allow God to speak to you. Anyways, he's preaching heresy. If you had the spirit of shut up, you'd learn that God's trying to say something to you. Not from me. But, honestly, like if we was to know our environment, if we was to be able to understand that sometimes we just need to be able, because there's people that we all have in our life that we're around, and when they're talking, we listen, right? And why do we do that? It's because we trust them, right? And we go on and we share with others what they say to us, and we'll own that junk. We will take. I'll preach sermons of some of my friends because I've heard it, and I'm like, yeah, dude, I want to take that, and I want to. Hey, can you send me that material? Because I think that's a word for our church. And you just know when there's a time that you go and share it with people so much that you'll own it. You'll say, man, that was, I learned that, and so I'm going to share that with somebody else. And often we'll even give them the benefit of the doubt because of their expertise and understanding in certain situations. And so we know that they've tried and been there, and they might have failed in a few areas. And so, yeah, we're going to take that. And so we won't waste any time sometimes even second guessing them. Like, we trust them. We believe what they say, right? Honestly, a lot of times we'll even take a hard truth to the chin that would offend us if anybody else gave it to us, right? That we wouldn't even easily take from someone else. But we will take it from them because we trust what they say, and we will believe them because they've been there and they've done that. And this is honestly a completely reasonable response, right? When we're interacting with somebody that we feel has superior knowledge to us. Right, which brings me to this section in Psalms 139 that I want to continue to read here, because he says this. David goes on to say in verse 13, he says, you made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. You know what he just said? He said, thank you for making me difficult. That's another word for somebody. And he says, your workmanship is marvelous. This is David, man. Like everything he's been through in life. We've been through Psalms 91. We've been through Psalms 50-something with Bathsheba. And we've been through all these things in life. And I believe that David is slumped up against a rock, and he's sitting there and he's thanking and he's praying to God. And he says, hey, God, you made all the delicate inner parts of my body. You knit me together in my mother's womb, and thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was even born, and every day of my life was recorded in your book, and every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. You knew me. Man, what a prayer. What a moment of David just saying, hey, listen, I know that I'm broken, God. I know that I have failed you. I know that I've been through a lot of stuff in life, but you know the inner workings of who I am and what has brought me to this point. And in the first section of Psalm 139, right, we see how complete the knowledge and understanding of God is. But then in this section, we get to see and begin to understand how God's level of comprehension and involvement extend all the way to the very moments of creation. The very moments of creation, and even further, is it's woven inside of the creation of who he created you to be. Every single one of us. And in these moments, I can just think about David and how he's feeling in these moments and everything that we're thinking about the life of David. Look, he's done been rejected by his own parents. He's done been overlooked. The prophet came to anoint him king as the next king rising up, and he was overlooked by every single one of his brothers, by his own father, by all of these people. I mean, he's walked in and he's defeated lions and bears, and he's defeated a giant, and then he got defeated by lust and by sexual perversion and gave over to have a son, Absalom, and Absalom was not able to inherit the father's stuff. And I mean, there was just all kinds of bad stuff and good stuff that happened, and here David is. He has all of that going on. And here's the first words that he believed. He never once believed all of the stuff that was going on, that everybody else was speaking over him. He never believed that he didn't measure up. He never spoke any of that stuff. In fact, it's never even recorded in Scripture. But here's what he believes. And he believes that the very first words and thoughts and intentions that was ever spoken over his life was this, is that you are marvelous and that you are wonderful. He says that your workmanship is marvelous. Right? And that I'm beautiful. Let me talk for a minute of the idea of wonderfully made. Do you know what that means, wonderfully made? These aren't just some sleep-deprived utterances of a brand new parent. You know what I'm talking about? You're just so tired that you don't even see the inconsistencies. Like, you don't even care. You're just like, oh, I'm just thankful you're so cute. Like, yes, you are just so cute. And these are the words that are chosen of the one who spoke the entire universe into existence. And when he spoke these words with you in mind. The one that watches over and tends to all things at all times. Like, God is everywhere at all times. The one who is arguably the smartest being in the entire cosmos. And this is what he says about us. Listen, words do matter. The words that you speak matter. The words that you speak over your children matter. The words that you speak over your wife matter. The words that you speak over your husband matter. The words that you speak over yourself matter, because you will begin to believe the lies, and so will the other people that we begin to speak over them, and words matter. That's why everywhere in Scripture you always see God speaking life over his people and his creation. He never spoke anything less than what that is, because he don't look at you as a failure. Never once does he look at you and point out your inconsistencies. He looks at you and says, hey, you are beautiful. You are wonderful. It's like me, it makes me think of walking into the house late last night, and, my family, all but my son, falls asleep at about 8:30. And so I walk into the house, and it's like they've all just been slain in the spirit. I see kids and wife laying all over the house. They're in different chairs, and I walk in, and I can't help but to sit there and just look at them and just think, man, they are just so beautiful. Like, man, look at that face. How could you be mad at her? I was looking at Bella. No, I'm just kidding. I was looking at Bella, but then I did look at you, and I'm like, man, she's such a good mom. Like, isn't she just so, like, look at what she's done. She slayed all these kids in the spirit. She led them in this. Man, no, but for real. And it doesn't matter to me, like, what they do, like, like, there's so many inconsistencies, and, like, we can get onto them time after time and time again, and all these things, but it never once changes my love for them. Never once changes my love for them. It may change my desires for them, but it never changes my love for them. I will never love my kids any less. I could love them more, but I could never love them any less. But is what I do want for them is whenever I look at them, I always think, man, I just want them to know. I wonder if they know what I see in them. I wonder if they know the potential that I see in them. I wonder if they know the love that I have for them. I wonder if they really know that I would die for them. Literally die for them. Like, I would do anything for my kids. And it doesn't matter how many times I have to yell at them, how many times I have to do something to them that day. Like, no matter how many times I look at them with the same, and when they walk in, all they have to do is bat their beautiful eyes give me a smile, and it's like everything just, I forgot everything that you just did. Come here. You just wooed me, you know. And did you know, though, that that's how God feels about you? See, a lot of us don't know that. And a lot of us don't believe that. And it's not that he don't care about what you've done. He does care about what you've done. But it never changes his love for you. He loves you the same amount that he loved you yesterday. He loves you the same amount that he loves you when he created you in your mother's womb. And nothing that you have done to this date has ever changed his love for you. His desires might be different for you. He might wish that you wouldn't continue to do some of the things that we continue to do, but his love never changes for you. And did you know that when you smile, that he looks upon you with love and grace and mercy and thinks, wow, she is so beautiful. Wow, he is so good looking. Wow, I went to myself and created him, and I can tell because when I look at them, man, they are such a good looking person. And man, they are so, if they even knew what I created them to do, man, if they even knew the potential that they had within them and what I created them to do, man, if they could just grasp what it was that they had within them. Listen, the words that we speak over ourselves matter, and God spoke words over us that says that we are wonderful and that we are marvelous and that we are beautiful. And I'd venture to guess that it's probably been a long time, if ever at all, that you've ever even been called wonderful. Right? Before we've ever even been called, I doubt any of us have ever been called marvelous. Right? But did you know that this is what God sees each one of us as, is marvelous? He sees us as beautiful. He sees us as wonderful. What I love about these words is that when David wrote Psalms 139, he understood God enough to recognize how God sees his creation. It didn't matter where he had been. It didn't matter what he had been through, but he understood, and David even further understood that he applied this personally to his own life. And he's like, God, I understand, like, it doesn't matter where I've been. It doesn't matter what I've done in life. You love me, and it never changes the amount of love for me. And so here you have before you, you have the creator of the entire cosmos, the creator God, with an unlimited knowledge, right? With an unlimited comprehension, who intricately and intimately made every single one of us, formed every single life, and yet he will stop to encounter you. He will stop to encounter every single one of us so that we can have a personal relationship. Why? Because he knows exactly who you are and what you are. He knows you exactly for what he created you to do. But for some, this could be a completely uncomfortable feeling because we know that he knows everything that we've been through. He knows that we've been through everything in life, everything that we did last night that was not honoring God. He knows everything that we've done in our life and in everything that we've went through. And yet he still says the same stuff about us. And for others, that's an encouraging word, right? It's something that's uplifting to either one of us. But either way, it's still the truth that we have to live in. Right? It's still the truth, because whether we believe it or not is a completely different conversation. But just because we don't believe the truth doesn't mean that it doesn't change the truth. Just because we don't believe it doesn't change it, right? God spoke it, and so that meant that's what it is. And just because we don't believe in the truth doesn't mean that it's still not the truth. And yet there are so many of us who don't feel wonderful. There's so many of us that don't feel marvelous or even beautiful, right? We feel unknown, right? We feel unloved. We feel increasingly lonely and increasingly crowded in a world that is just desiring for attention, and it just always feels like something is off, right? Like we don't feel accepted, right? We don't feel loved. We don't feel like we measure up. We don't feel like we have what it takes in order to be, and we judge our reputation by likes and followers that subscribe to us on different platforms, and we gauge whether people like us by our presence on online platforms and different things. And we're always coming back to where there's this disconnect between what God says about us and how we feel. right? But what's the disconnect? Like, where is this disconnect at? You hear that? Where is this disconnect at? Like, what can we do to restore the connection? Because I believe that I want to talk for just the last moments that I have with you guys and get your attention to restore the connection. Has anybody ever played the telephone game? Right? Like, you remember whenever you was younger and like you would have all these people line up, and I think they would do it at school. And you know, as a refresher, like it begins with one person whispering something to the person next to them, and then they whisper something to the person next to them, and then it continues on in this line until it gets down to the very last person, which shares aloud what they heard from the person that was before them. And as you can imagine, the original message gets so distorted. Like, it gets so distorted the further down the line it goes, and by the end of it, a simple message that says my favorite food is pepperoni pizza has now easily become Frankie's dog Charlie attacked its Aunt Harry. And it's true. Honestly, this is why gossip is so detrimental to the body of Christ, because we are now saying stuff that is tearing down the character of people that was never even said when they said something, because it's got distorted so far down the line that by the time we heard it in a prayer request in a Christian circle at a Bible study, then now we've went and told somebody else in a prayer request that they should be praying for Billy, because Billy's now engaged in all kinds of stuff that he shouldn't be living in, and he really needs prayer, and he said this, and then it was never even said like that. But with this, when we think about this, can you imagine how a clear message like, hey, you are fully known, you are loved, you were created with purpose, you are forgiven, you are forgiven of everything that you have ever been through. It doesn't matter what you have been through. It doesn't matter where you have been. It doesn't matter anything. And it can become so easily distorted as it makes its way through all the chaos and distortion of life. Right? The simple message that we have literally every day is another opportunity to hear mixed messaging and destructive messaging and confusing messaging about who we are. Right? And we don't get to hear the message that is being spoken to us, not to mention that it's a very real enemy that's out there trying to kill, steal, and destroy every good thing that the Lord has for you, that God has placed in our life. And this is why it's so important for me to get personally connected and rooted in the truth every single day, and every single day of our life to get rooted in the truth. And for me personally, I would argue that it is the most important time in the day is in the very beginning of the day. If you want to restore the connection, if you want to be able to hear the word of the Lord and giving it back to him, I mean, I would argue that the morning is the most important part of the day, and we can think of this as restoring the connection. Because this is the time to go back to the source of messaging and hear clearly what's actually being spoken, what's actually being said, and it's removing the barriers. Sorry, I'm not going to say that. And it's removing the barriers from everything that is being said in our own lives. And it's removing the barriers of us hearing a clear message. And in the telephone game, right, it's so much easier to get an accurate message for the first person that's standing in the line. For the one that's in the line at the very beginning, it's the easiest to hear what the real message that was even being said was before it goes through all of these other translators of haters, right? And in the same way, you and I all of us need to make sure that we're getting undistracted message, right? One that we remove every disturbance. What a word. To remove everything that is getting in the way of what God is trying to say to you. Everything that the Lord wants to speak over your life. Sometimes you have to find opportunities to remove the distractions so that you can get back to the very voice of what needs to be telling you what you need to hear so that you can hear what God is speaking over your life. Because I believe that there are way too many distractions sometimes that are competing for our attention and are trying to distract us of what God is trying to say. But I believe that even right now, in this moment, that God is trying to say something and some people are not even being able to hear what God is saying to you. And I believe that right now is a moment that God wants to speak life and he wants to speak purpose into some people, because there are some people, I believe, in this room that are so broken today, that came in here bankrupt, that came in here desperate, and you have been fighting to even keep your attention on what is being said right now. And I just want you to know that you are loved. And you are wanted, and you are wonderful. It doesn't matter what anybody else has said to you. It doesn't matter what you've said to yourself. It doesn't matter what you've believed coming into this place. Every other person that is telling you something different is a lie. Because if the Bible is giving you a word, if the Bible is telling you something, then this is what we need to believe. And we've got to remove every distraction that gets in the way of that. And we got to begin to believe what the Word says about us and what God says about us. And we can't settle for anything that gets in between. Because you know what's interesting? If you was to have a phone call on this right here, and you was to have poor reception. I've been on a phone call where I had terrible reception. And it gets frustrating because you keep repeating yourself. And then you realize that everything that you just said, they didn't even hear. And now you have to repeat yourself again, and then you finally get reception, and it's like, hey, where did we leave off? Right? We wouldn't settle for that kind of conversation with a friend. Why do we settle for that kind of conversation with God? Right? Where we have such terrible reception that we're so far away that we're what used to be called roaming. Some of y'all don't even know about that. Back in the day when you had a cell phone and you didn't have service, it was called roaming, and you paid more for that. Okay? I think a lot of us are roaming right now. We've got terrible reception, and I wonder how much more we should seek full reception when the Father is speaking to us, right? When we can get back and gain reception to where we can hear him clearly, to where we remove every distraction, to where we get back to the voice that the Lord, I wonder if there's some time that we could carve out this week to get reconnected with the Father. Right, that we could get so reconnected with the Father that every other voice outside of us doesn't even matter. That the voice that has been gaining attention in our life and getting the authority in our life, it becomes the second voice. Because the first voice that we need to hear is the voice of the Father and what he says about us. And that we can say no to some things and yes to Jesus, right? And we can begin to say yes, and what habits or practices can we begin to eliminate in our lives that are bringing distortion and chaos into our life, so that we can remove some of the distractions to get us to where God needs us at, so that he can hear us, so that he can hear our lives, so that he can hear our attention and get our attention, so that he can begin to speak life and purpose over us. Because there are some people in here today that have felt unworthy. There are some people in here that don't feel like they measure up. There's some people in here that are scared to share their testimony. But did you know that you are created wonderfully and beautifully in the image of our Creator, and he set this whole world a stop just for you? Just for you. Like, it doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter where you've been, that your entire life was created in the image of him. And if we could begin to understand what God has called us to and what he has said over our lives, listen, doctrinal issues doesn't matter. All this other stuff doesn't matter. If you can begin to understand that you are a child of God, everything else can dissipate. Everything else can dissipate. Because when you begin to understand your identity and who God has called you to be, all of a sudden something can well deep within you, that all of a sudden life and purpose and drive can come out of you so that you can complete everything that the Lord has set in your path. And I believe that there are some in here today that he's calling to that he's wanting to rise up and feel fulfilled in their purpose, and set aside some stuff in their life to begin to seek after who has called you and who made you, and that you are known and you are wanted and you are desired because you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of our Creator. If I could have everybody stand.